And in fact, maybe what happened in the past was a good thing. Because if it hadn't happened, in fact, if anything had been any different in your life, we wouldn't be here having this conversation right now. You wouldn't be listening to this right now. And maybe where you are right now is the best place for you to be. Hi, I'm Liam Naden, and welcome to my podcast, Let Yourself Off the Hook. As someone who has studied success for decades, I have found the formula for achieving your dreams and goals, and it's all to do with how you use your brain. Each week on my show, I will provide you with the tools, resources, and expertise to utilize your brain to its ultimate potential and remove the barriers to your success. And as you will discover, true success in every area of your life only comes when you let yourself off the hook. When you think about the future, what are your thoughts? When you look into the future with your ideas, what do you see? Do you see good things happening? Do you see good things on the way? Or do you see bad things on the way? Problems, things that are going to harm you or hurt you. Now, we've all been told, look, don't worry about the future. Everything's going to be okay. But we don't take that advice, do we? We still worry about the future. Why is that? Well, in this episode, we're going to look at why we don't trust the future. And it's really all to do with how our brain works. Now, this episode is really a follow-on from several of the other previous episodes. And in fact, it's really a very similar message, if you like, to a lot of the things that I'm talking about in this podcast. But I hope in this episode, I'm going to give you a different perspective or a new way of looking at this idea of why we shouldn't be worried, why we shouldn't be afraid of the future, and we should look forward to the future rather than dread it. And, this message has been told to us throughout history. Do not be afraid. Do not worry about tomorrow. But we still do. So in this episode, I'm going to give you some new ideas that are going to help you to be able to deal with this whole idea of not worrying about the future. And as a result, you're going to realize and see that it can have a major positive impact on how your life unfolds. This is such a simple idea about not worrying about the future and about trusting and seeing the future in a good way. And you're probably thinking at this stage, if you've listened to some previous episodes, but you've talked about this before. It reminds me of the story of the preacher who was giving a sermon one day. It was a very powerful talk that he gave his congregation. And they were very impressed with what he said. And the following week, he gave the same sermon, word for word, literally. And the people were thinking, well, this is a bit strange. Didn't we hear this before? Well, didn't we hear this last week? But they just let it go, thinking maybe perhaps they'd made a mistake. But the following week, the preacher again gave exactly the same sermon, word for word. And the people by this stage were starting to get a little bit concerned and think, is this guy all right? Does he not realize he's saying exactly the same thing? It's the third week in a row. Well, after the fourth week, when again the preacher gave exactly the same sermon, several members of the congregation thought to themselves, we need to find out what's going on here. So they approached the preacher afterwards and said, Reverend, are you aware that you've given exactly the same sermon for the last few weeks? And the preacher replied, yes, I have given you exactly the same sermon week after week, and I'm going to continue giving it until you finally get it and start applying it in your own life. Now, I'm not a preacher and I'm not professing to be, but many of the ideas I'm sharing with you, they really come down to some quite simple concepts. They're simple, but they're not necessarily easy to apply. But the more you understand them, the easier they do become to apply. Okay, so this whole thing about not trusting in the future and instead worrying about the future, we might think it's natural. We might think, and we've probably often heard, well, it's natural to worry. In fact, it's good to worry. You have to be prepared for the bad things that might might happen in the future. So worry is a good thing, and it's natural. But is it really natural? And is it really good? Well, it turns out neither thing is true. It's not natural, and it's not good for you. In fact, not only is worry and fear of the future, not only is it not natural, at least in the way most people are using it, but it's actually pointless and destructive. And here are several reasons why it is pointless and destructive. Firstly, worrying about the future, being afraid of the future, it doesn't help. It doesn't help your present situation. Because when you're worried, you tend to stay stuck. You don't do things. Worry stops you from taking action. You're worried you're going to make a mistake. You're worried you're going to do the wrong thing. You're not sure what the right thing is to do. And so you tend to take far less action as a result. And the other thing that happens when you're not trusting in the future and when you're living instead in a state of worry or fear is that you tend to do the wrong things. The actions that you do take tend to come from a place of impulse or reaction. And so you end up doing the wrong things. And on the other side, you don't do the right things. Can you think of an example in your own life where this might have been true? Maybe once you had an argument with somebody, perhaps in your relationship, your marriage, or a business associate, or even a customer from your business. But you had an argument with somebody, and you were in a state of anger and stress. And what did you do? You probably said the wrong thing, something that made the situation far worse. And you might have even said to yourself, why did I do that? Why did I say that? It only made things worse. Well, you literally did the wrong thing because of the emotional state that you were in. And we'll look at this shortly about how your brain actually determines not only your emotional state, but the emotional state determines your actions. Here's another really interesting thing that happens when you're worried about the future or when you're not trusting. You tend to experience the very thing that you're worried about. Now, I often say this to people, perhaps who are dealing with a relationship problem, and they're really worried about their relationship or their marriage. And they're thinking, I want to fix this. I want to get this right. I'm worried about the future. I'm worried about the fact that our relationship might even end, or it certainly won't get any better. I'm really stressed and worried. And I say, well, what are you really afraid of experiencing in the future that's causing you to feel worried? And they say things like, well, I'm worried that I won't have a marriage or relationship with the deep intimacy and connection with another person that I really want to have. It won't bring me joy and real feelings of love and excitement and happiness. I'm going to miss out on all of those things. And of course I say to them, but isn't that what you're experiencing right now? With all of the problems in your relationship, you don't have the level of intimacy, connection, happiness, joy, and fulfillment that you want. You're literally experiencing the very thing that you're worried about. Another thing that happens when we're worried and we're not trusting in the future is that it wastes a lot of time and energy. We spend all our time thinking through possible scenarios, worrying about what we think might happen when it hasn't even happened. And we're worried about what we should do and how we're going to cope. But we're wasting all of this precious time and energy. Because the funny thing is, and here's another truth about worrying about the future rather than trusting in it, is that things never turn out as bad as we think they will. Think back to something in the past that you were really worried about. Maybe it was a big problem you were dealing with. Maybe it was a situation you were in where you thought you were going to lose your money or not have enough to survive. Or maybe you were going to lose a relationship or not have something in your life that you really wanted. If you just think about what that is, answer this question. Did things really turn out as badly as you expected? Or did you get through that experience? Maybe things even turned out better as a result of that experience. or even in spite of it. But did things really turn out as bad as you thought they would? And if you really think about this, and I think if you really spend some time to think about this, you realize that they probably didn't. They almost certainly didn't. They didn't turn out as badly as you thought they might. Because you got through it. You survived. You're here right now listening to this. And in fact, maybe what happened in the past was a good thing. Because if it hadn't happened, in fact, if anything had been any different in your life, we wouldn't be here having this conversation right now. You wouldn't be listening to this right now. And maybe where you are right now is the best place for you to be. And not only this idea of things never turn out as bad as we expect in our own life, or as we think they might, or as we worry about how they might turn out, isn't that also true when it comes to world events, things that are going on around you? I mean, for as long as mankind has existed, there have always been doom and gloom prophecies about all of the bad things that are happening that might result in catastrophes. But the truth is, we're all still here. All of these bad things that are supposed to have happened, they haven't happened, and they're not going to happen. Because the problem is, if you like, as human beings, we can't see the future. We think we can, but we can only see one possibility for the future. And that's because most of the time we think in a linear way. We see things progressing in one direction. But that's not how the world works. Everything evolves in an exponential way. Every action, everything that happens, has an infinite number of reactions, of possibilities, of things that could happen as a result. So we can never predict exactly the way things are going to go. We can never see the future as it's going to be. So all of these things are reasons why worrying about the future, not trusting in the future, not believing and knowing that the future is going to be great, these are all reasons why it's pointless and destructive. But there's one other reason, and really this is the most important, and that is that worrying, not trusting the future, literally blocks your ability to see the truth. It blocks your ability to see the reality of what's really going on around you. And it blocks your ability to take the right actions based not on fear, but on that truth, on the reality of your life and your life situation. Now again, this is all to do with how the brain functions, and I'll explain it shortly. But really think about this. If you just look around you right now, become aware of what's really in your life right now. Maybe there's something you're worried about, but isn't that quite different to the reality of what's around you in your life right now? Just look at where you're sitting or standing or the environment around you. Aren't you surrounded by something that is literally infinite, something that's really organized and orderly and beautiful? Look at your body. Isn't it the most amazing, magnificent piece of architecture, machinery, that is keeping you alive in every moment and allowing you to experience all of this? And just think of all of the technology we're surrounded by, the things that make our lives not only easier, but more enjoyable. Things that were unthinkable even 20 years ago, let alone 100 or 1,000 or a million years ago. It's all incredible. But why aren't we aware of this all of the time? Why aren't we focusing on this? Because whatever problem we're dealing with, or whatever problem we think exists, whatever it is that we're worrying about, the reality, the truth, is that it represents only a tiny, tiny part of what is in our world. So let's look more closely at why we worry, why we don't trust in the future, why we have, despite our best intentions often, why we have these negative thoughts and we can't help ourselves from worrying. We would like to trust, we would like to believe that good things were going to happen, but something in us is preventing us from doing that. That's what we're going to look at. Now you might be thinking, well, the reason we worry is because we have these negative thoughts. We have these ideas that come into our head about, oh, this bad thing might happen, or I really don't want that to happen, or I'm afraid that that might happen. So you might think the solution, therefore, is to have positive thoughts. And we've often heard this. You have to think positive. You have to believe. And you might have tried, like I certainly have, you might have tried to change your negative thoughts to positive ones. In other words, when you're aware that you're thinking something negative, you try and flip it around and try and make it positive. And instead of worrying and saying, I'm really worried about what's going to happen, you say something positive, such as, I know it's all going to turn out well in the future. I know it's going to work. I know I'm going to solve my problem. I can do it. But the thing is, this doesn't really work, does it? If you're really honest. And I tried this for years. I tried this positive thinking idea, trying to catch myself out when I thought negative thoughts and replace them with positive statements, positive ideas, in the hope that they would make me feel better. But I'm sure you'll agree, it's very difficult to think positive thoughts when you think bad things are happening in your life. You know, if you're having an argument with your spouse, or something in your business isn't working, or you're unhappy in your career, it's very difficult to say to yourself, well, everything's going to work out fine. I know it will. It's very difficult, isn't it? And at the very best, these positive thoughts, this positive thinking, it's only temporary. It's not long before all this anxiety and worry starts to come back into your life and into your feelings. And before you know it, you're not thinking positive and you're not feeling good either. So it took me a long time to realize and really to accept the truth that positive thinking on its own doesn't really work. You can't manufacture it out of the air. It's not something you can create on a whim. So if you can't manufacture positive thinking, if you can't stop worrying by trying to not worry, if you can't trust the future by telling yourself, I'll trust the future, is it possible to actually do that? How can you trust the future? How can you actually stop worrying? Well, there's only one way to do that. There's only one way to deal with this problem. There's only one way to shift from stress, fear, and worry and anxiety about the future to knowing deep in your heart and soul that the future is going to be great. And that is, you need to activate the right brain state. More specifically, you need to deactivate the part of your brain that is causing you to feel and think stress, worry, anxiety. You need to deactivate the part of your brain that's keeping you stuck in that place. And when you do, you actually activate the other part of your brain which sees the truth, sees the reality, sees the perspective on your life, which is things are good and things will be better in the future. So this brain state idea, this is actually based on science. And if you've listened to my previous episodes or done my free webinar or any of my courses, you'll know my 4-part brain model. The 4 parts of your brain are your rational thinking brain, which is responsible for storing all of the information that you gather in your life, your emotional feeling brain, which determines how you feel, your survival brain, which manages your moment-by-moment survival, including the way you deal with and fight off threats and dangers, and your creative brain, the master part of your brain, which is the part that manages your life and helps you to be and ensures that you are the best that you can be. So here's what happens on a biological, physical level that enables you either to stay stuck in a worried state or activate the big picture part of your brain. And it comes from realizing that when you feel fear, stress, worry, anxiety, whether it be about something that's happening to you right now or something that you think might happen in the future, when you have all these negative thoughts, this is literally a response from your brain telling you and telling your entire body and your thoughts and the rest of your brain as well. It's a response from your brain telling you that you, in this moment, are faced with an immediate threat to your survival or something that can physically harm you. Your brain is literally saying there is a danger here. And when your brain, or this particular part of your brain, perceives that there's a danger to you, it sends a message in the form of chemicals which activate fear, stress, worry, and anxiety and prepare you to deal with the threat or danger. So what happens to you when you're in this state of fear, stress, worry, anxiety, which means you've activated your survival brain, the part that's designed to fight off the danger, and when you're prepared to fight off a danger, what's actually happening in that state? Well, one of the things that's happening is your brain is becoming 100% focused on threats and dangers. That's its focus. So literally what's happening is your brain is only allowing you to see anything that might be negative or dangerous in your environment. It literally blocks out everything else. Because imagine you are in a dangerous situation. You don't want your brain showing you anything else other than what you need to do to eliminate that danger. So your brain literally needs to block out the positive. It needs to show you, it needs to be looking all the time. Where's the threat? Where's the danger? Imagine going back to prehistoric times and you see a lion running towards you. Oh, and your brain has to say, okay, there's a lion running towards me. How big is it? How fast is it running? How close is it? Are there any other dangers that I haven't noticed? I need to instantly see all of the threats and dangers so that I can deal with them. Because if I don't see them, if I miss one, it might mean I die. That danger, that threat might kill me. If there's a snake in the grass, that might get me rather than the lion. So your brain, for your survival, is programmed when you feel fear, stress, worry, and anxiety, and you activate your survival fight or flight part of your brain. It's literally programmed to make sure you don't see anything positive. You have to analyze everything purely from a negative point of view. So can you start to understand now this is why when you're in this fearful state, you think many bad things are going to happen. You watch the news and it's all doom and gloom and it makes you feel bad and all you can see are the bad things that might happen. This is your brain preparing you for the fact that bad things might happen. It needs to be prepared for that. The other thing that happens in your brain is that it might need all of the energy and maybe even more, all of the energy it can possibly muster to fight off that danger. So for example, if a lion's running at you, you might need superhuman strength either to fight it off or run away. So where does the energy come from? Well, it has to come from the rest of your body. So your survival brain, when you're in this state, when you're in the survival state ready to fight off a danger, it takes any energy that it can from any other parts of your body and your brain to potentially use that energy to fight off the danger. This is why when people are stressed and often depressed, they lose their appetite because your digestion literally shuts down. And one of the things that's shut down is all of those mental functions that you don't need when you're fighting off a danger. So things like your creativity, your imagination, your big picture thinking, your true awareness, you don't need any of those things. In fact, they could be detrimental to you to have those higher awarenesses when all you really need to do is be focusing on getting rid of that danger. So all of the energy from that part of your brain is diverted into your survival brain. So what we don't realize is that when we're in this state of fear, worry, and anxiety, we've activated this part of our brain and we don't see reality. We see a skewed reality. We see a reality which filters out all the good stuff and only highlights the bad stuff, the things, the dangers and threats that we need to eliminate or might need to eliminate. So it blocks out the positive. And this is why you can try and think positive all you can, but when you're feeling stressed, worried, afraid and anxious, you literally can't. Your brain is not allowing you to. Your brain will fight you and say to you, stop thinking positive. It's not true. You've got all these problems. You know it's not true that all these good things could happen. You've got these dangers in your life. This is what your brain is trying to convince you to do because it could be necessary for your survival. And of course, this is also true for the future. When your brain starts to think of the future, all it can see in this survival state is all the bad things that could happen. It can only run through all the negative scenarios because it needs to be prepared to deal with any of those things should they occur. So the truth is, the real reason we don't trust in the future, the real reason we worry about the future, is not because we want to, it's because we have to when we're in a state of fear, worry, and anxiety. We have no choice. Our brain is trying to protect us from harm and potential threats. That's what it's designed to do. But remember, your awareness is skewed in that state. It's not real. You don't see the truth. You can't see the truth. And it's not your fault. It's just the way your brain works, the way you're operating your brain. I mean, trying to trust in the future, trying to not worry, when you're activating this part of your brain, when you're in this fear, worry, stress state, that's about as futile as trying to drive your car over the hill when you haven't got any wheels on the car. It's just not going to work. The machine is not designed to work that way. It can't. No matter how motivated you are or how much you want things to be different, that is the reality. And it's beyond your control to the extent that that's how the machine is. Now, the great thing is that when you understand this, when you understand it's the machinery that's at fault or how you're using the machinery, not your application of the ideas, like not you trying to think positive, when you understand all this, then you can actually do something about it. And you can do something in a way that actually gets a result. And you can say to yourself, okay, I understand that these feelings of fear, worry, and anxiety, they're causing me to go into this or to activate this brain state, my survival brain, that's only going to keep me stuck. So what do I need to do? Not to activate that state. I need to stop the feelings of fear, worry, and anxiety. And there are ways to do that. And I've talked in many of the previous podcasts some of the ways that you can do that. And I cover this in much more detail in my coaching. But the great news is when you do this, things tend to snowball in a positive way. When you stop activating this part, the survival part of your brain, your awareness shifts. You start to see reality in a much clearer and broader way. And you see the perspective not only of your life and your life situation, but of your problem as well. And when you do that, you activate another part of your brain which makes you much more able to deal with that problem and in a much more effective way. You start to see the truth that we don't actually live in a bad world after all. You don't actually have a bad life after all. In fact, the world and your life is truly amazing. And when you see that, when you see the truth, when you see the reality of who you really are and what your world really is, you develop a deep knowing of the truth, which is that the future is going to be great. Everything's going to work out fine. And even better, you find yourself doing the things that you need to do to ensure that that happens. This is Liam Naden signing off. Thanks for watching. But before you go, there's some action to take. Hit the subscribe and like buttons and leave your thoughts in a comment below. I'd love your feedback. And if you have friends who you think would benefit from this, please share it with them. Thanks again for your support and stay tuned for more from me, Liam Naden. And remember, you can only reach your full potential when you let yourself off the hook.